Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever in the world you are. It's Thursday. It's 12 p.m. here on the eastern seaboard of the United States, and it's that time to hang with Harley. And Harley Schlanger is somebody who needs no introduction. You know him from all the work he's done for LaRouche Pack, his help that he's done with us over here at Rogue Money, and his outlet for sharing this amazing information. Harley is again, folks, somebody who brings veritas, calm, and common sense to this very, very confusing geopolitical situation that we are all in today. So, whenever Harley comes on, it's a great time to shut off all the noise, to shut off everything that's being out there, that's being promulgated and propagated, and tune in and hang on every single word. It's very important, especially today. Harley got some great intel to share with us as well. Without further ado, Harley, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm hanging in there, man. I'm back from vacation, so I'm happy about that. A little happy, a little sad. Sad that vacation's over. But I'm
Yeah,
happy to be back at work. But I'm
good.
well rested, Harley. I'm well rested. I'm just trying to get back into the swing of things. It's not the easiest in the world.
Well, let me help you with that easing back in because, look, the developments in the last week are just extraordinary.
Mm.
And I think I can help give people some perspective on this so they don't get sidetracked or distracted or demoralized by what's happening, especially around Charlottesville. But I think you can't understand what happened in Charlottesville without knowing that the whole Russian narrative is collapsing. The report of the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity is being widely circulated. It's in Trump's hands. He's looked it over. Key people in the intelligence community are being forced to acknowledge
Yeah.
that this is something they didn't intend to have happen, namely, former top people in their profession coming out with a report that completely repudiates the Brennan Clapper so called intelligence community line that the Russian interference in the election and Trump's collusion with the Russians should invalidate his presidency. But of all places, The Nation magazine ran it. And this then was followed up a story on Bloomberg News. Salon did a very good story. What did the Democratic National Committee say? They said anybody pushing this story is pushing the conspiracy theories of Trump and his administration.
Mm.
That's about as weak as you can get. And then
Unreal.
the Washington Post ran a story basically saying the same thing and putting pressure on the nation to repudiate the story. Now, as this is collapsing, as the Russia story is collapsing, what do they bring in? Another of their tricks from the regime change playbook, the Maidan playbook, what was done
Right.
in Ukraine, where you have controlled operations on both the left and the right. Everyone knows, everyone with a brain in their head who was around in the 70s and 80s knows that the FBI not only infiltrated the Klan, but kept it alive in the 70s.
Right.
There wouldn't have been a Klansman marching were it not for the FBI. In fact, when I was in North Carolina in the 70s, we had a joke. How do you tell the FBI agents in the Klan? They're the ones with the stained sheets. You have on the one side then this FBI operation in the so-called right movement, the neo-Nazis and so on. But the Antifa, which people aren't so familiar with in the United States, in Europe, this was a NATO operation, a so-called leftist, anti-right-wing thug deployment. We've seen it a little bit in Berkeley, in Portland, Oregon, and now we've seen it in Charlottesville. It's funded by the same networks. And so you have Soros and Soros types on the right-wing side funding these provocations while the police were told to stand down instead of trying to separate the two sides to create a riot.
Hmm.
Now, what's the immediate impact of this? Trump said something which was true, that there were thugs on both sides, and he's
Right.
immediately excoriated as a Nazi lover, as a slave lover, and so on. And my advice to the president is get out ahead of this and point out that the same people who are attacking the so-called neo-Nazi right wing in the United States were praising the neo-Nazi right wing in Ukraine.
Correct.
And so
Correct.
here you have a narrative that's being shaped for what purpose? Not just to impeach Trump or shut him down, but to break up what otherwise is an accelerating, successful diplomatic initiative that has the potential of destroying forever the Bush, Obama, Hillary Clinton paradigm of East versus West, North versus South, global bankers dictatorship.
Right.
What's at stake here, and that's why I say don't get caught up in the ins and outs of Charlottesville, trying to find a picture of someone who looks like someone else, or looking for someone handing out money to demonstrators. The issue here is the regime change has been brought to the United States exactly as my publication, Executive Intelligence Review, forecast back in a February special report where we said neo-Nazis, it was called Obama and Soros, Nazis in Maidan Square 2014,
Mm-hmm.
Nazis in the USA 2017, question mark. So this is predictable. They're now using this to try to destroy Trump precisely as his diplomacy is starting to take effect.
Correct. Correct. I mean, it's a last-ditch effort. I mean, now it's like the most trending meme on Twitter, or the most trending hashtag on Twitter is impeach Trump, 7 reasons why. That's like the trending meme. And then the number one tweet of all time, Harley, is the tweet that Barack Obama has put out about Charlottesville. Oh, how sweet.
Well,
I mean,
which he
it's so Trump
plagiarized
does.
from Nelson Mandela.
Correct. Exactly.
Now, let me give your listeners just a brief picture of this diplomacy, because a week and a half ago it looked like we were heading toward nuclear war with North Korea, and the stories started coming out that Trump is crazy, Trump is about to launch a nuclear war, and so on. Now, on August 10th, Secretary of State Tillerson, who, by the way, is under attack all the time by this corrupt media,
Right.
Tillerson made a very clear statement. We do not seek a regime change. We are not your enemy. He said this to North Korea. He said, we want to dialogue with you about a future that will give you security and a future economic prosperity for North Korea.
Right.
Now, this was followed up by General Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, going to Asia. First, he went to Seoul, South Korea, and he said, we intend to do everything we absolutely can to support Secretary Tillerson's current path.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this, 2 days before that, Trump had a phone call with President Xi Jinping, in which the White House readout of the phone call said, the relationship between the two presidents is an extremely close one, and will hopefully lead to a peaceful resolution of the North Korea problem. And the Chinese media praised Trump for taking the initiative to call Xi. Now, Dunford then went to Beijing. Remember, Dunford is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, hasn't really shown himself to be a particularly great figure yet, but he met with the head of the Chinese military. And he said, look, we have difficult issues, but I know we share one thing. We share a commitment to work through these difficult issues. And the Chinese leaders said, we want you to know more about our military, boost our cooperation, and build up our friendship. And they took Dunford to the northern area of China where the military is on alert because of the North Korean situation.
Sure.
Gave them a full tour, and then they signed an agreement for 3-star general regular communication to avoid any mistakes that could happen.
Right.
So you have this extremely significant coordinated activity. Now, the Russians are involved in this also. The Russians are working with the Chinese. But Dunford on August 8th spoke with Gerasimov, who's the Russian chief of staff. And they said in their joint communique that they shared views on Syria and Iraq. We will take further actions to counter international terrorist organizations, and we will expand the de-escalation zones in southwest Syria. Now, if Trump were not Trump, and if we didn't have a war party running the media, the deep state, and both political parties, people would be quite excited by this collaboration, which is so different than deploying troops on borders and building anti-missile systems and modernizing nuclear weapons. You actually can see a way into the future out of this war danger.
Yeah.
Instead, the media is so committed to removing Trump that this, what we just now take for granted, the Russia story is going to be a headline every day. Now, let me just read you a quote, which your listeners may be familiar with. A fellow named Phil Mudd. He's very, well, his name sort of describes him. He's a muddy character. Former CNN, or he is now a CNN contributor, but he's a former CIA Counterterrorist Center Deputy Director, and he was appointed by Robert Mueller in director of the FBI's National Security Branch. He said on August 11th on US television, "I'm telling you as a former government official, government's going to kill this guy," referring to Trump.
Wow.
And he said because he's defending Putin and turning against our brave men and women in our intelligence community.
Terrible. What an idiotic statement.
Well, this is a guy who should be investigated by the Secret Service and probably thrown in jail. Because if you know anything about how these things work, he's just reflecting what's probably an ongoing discussion process among these deep state operatives.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think this is a pretty compelling picture. You have an escalated attempt at a coup at a moment where 7 months of work to build trust between Trump with Putin and Trump with Xi Jinping is beginning to bear some fruit.
I'd say so. I definitely say so. I think that's a very good thing. Harley, in terms of what's going on, also the recent achievements in the Middle East, especially that the Syrian Arab army, along with the Russians, were able to recapture 250% of Syria, of lost territory that they've achieved. How is the deep state taking all this info in? Because they're losing on that front as well.
Well, this was the whole point. Their whole goal and their desire to have Hillary Clinton as president was to have permanent warfare. Permanent warfare means that you keep these terrorist capabilities or rogue state capabilities as a means of ramping up a war whenever you need it. And of course, the United States has been at war since shortly after 9/11, 2001.
Yeah.
So they don't look kindly on a president who says, why are we at war? Why are we expending national treasures in terms of money, but more importantly, in terms of wasted lives? Why are we doing this? Their answer is, that's business as usual. Get out of our way. Join us or we'll get rid of you. Trump, you could say, is an inconvenient president for them.
Right. Right.
And I think I would be remiss if I didn't take up your and my regular discussion on the economy, because looming behind this is the uncontrollable buildup of debt, both in terms of corporate debt, non-financial corporate debt, that is family debt, student loans, car loans, commercial real estate loans, and then the stock market bubble, where most people have their pension funds. And the other day, a top investment official at the Bank of America, which is a dubious enterprise if there ever was one, but he said something that was true. He said that we're looking at a 33% possible correction during the course of the next months in the stock market. Now, you had the former finance minister of Italy, Giulio Tremonti, who's someone who has quite often commented on Lyndon LaRouche being an economic genius. Tremonti put out a statement with the situation in Italy taking a turn for the worse. And he said, look, Italy's in bad, but all of Europe's in bad shape. We could see a debt blowout or a stock market crash that would then precipitate a bond blowout, something that would be bigger than 2008. So I think these warning signs about the economy, you cannot remove them from the desperation of the deep state. Why do they want war? It's not just that you make money from war, it's that wars are disruptive of any potential to organize a counterforce. And they use wars, including such things as spying, police states, terrorism, to distract people from the underlying issue, which is that we not only haven't recovered from the 2008 crash, but we're going into a worse situation. So put all of this together, and what do you have? They are weak and desperate.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that people just have to grasp. The idea that we're just sitting back and commenting on an approaching cataclysm is wrong. We've got to be actively involved in defending the president when he's doing what's right. And what he needs to do more now would be the perfect opportunity to launch the other flank against their weak flank, which is Glass-Steagall and a bankruptcy reorganization of the too big to fail banks.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Recently, it was announced that the FBI has reopened the Clinton Lynch meetings, and it couldn't have come at a better time, Harley.
Well, there are all sorts of things that are coming up because, when you start pushing in one direction, one time Lyndon LaRue said, "Don't say bad things about me if you have something to hide."
Mm.
And, I think the truth of the matter here is that the people who have more to hide than Trump are the people behind Clinton, the Obama team, Soros, the Three Stooges, Clapper, Comey, and Brennan. And, Mueller is a totally walking conflict of interest, I guess you could say.
Right. Right.
So the question is, who's going to tell the truth? And I think what President Trump has to do is stop telling partial truths.
Yeah.
As he did on the Charlottesville thing, and then say the whole thing. This was a George Soros operation.
Exactly.
Coordinated with funders of so-called right organizations. And what's the purpose? To have a Maidan-style destabilization of the United States to get rid of me so you can go back to politics as usual, permanent warfare, austerity, and funny money, money flowing to the wealthy and everyone else left with nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
He did say the solution to the race problem is we've got to have some good jobs.
Right. I mean, because when people are working and making money, who's got time for all this crap?
Well, that's true. And when you have a sense of a future, when you're a young person, 20, 25, thinking about what am I going to do over the next 50 years, you actually can see over the horizon that there'll be changes, but you're prepared for them. You have an education, you have an economy that's functioning on your behalf, and you can participate in the processes of government, whether local, state, or national, to help realize that. Then you're too busy to hate.
Right.
But if you have nothing and you see someone else getting something, even if you're a poor unemployed worker and you see a Mexican immigrant get a job, it's very easy to manipulate that into a racial conflict.
Yeah. Exactly correct. Exactly correct.
And the saddest thing is that the target for the so-called Antifa are the young people who otherwise were rallied to support Trump and Bernie Sanders because they were anti-establishment candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're being manipulated by that same corrupt, immoral establishment to bang each other over the head when there's a broad potential for cooperation from the so-called moderate left and moderate right, and even from elements that are beyond the moderates that could come together in an anti-Wall Street, anti-City of London fight for the nation and its future.
Absolutely correct. Harley, we've come to the end of the broadcast. We have about a minute or so left. Why don't you give out your contact information as well as your closing thoughts and how people could follow your work?
Well, if you listen to what I said, you can tell that I'm not always such a quiet, reserved voice of reason. Right now, I'm calling on people to let your reason and your passion come together. and to form an unstoppable force in this country around a couple of programs that will change history. Glass-Steagall, for example, to take away the power of the Wall Street banks, and support for the diplomatic initiatives which at the top are centered around the U.S. cooperation with Russia and China on the New Silk Road. And to get more information on that, you can go to our website, larouchepac.com. People can see there a wide array of videos and reports. And if people want to be in touch with me, they can always contact me. And I do get some emails from your listeners. You can send it to me at harleysch@gmail.com. I welcome both your criticism and your questions.
Fantastic. Harley Schlanger, thank you so much for joining us again and sharing these valuable insights with the audience today. Folks, we'll be back again next week with Hanging with Harley, so stay tuned right here. Hit the subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you will be alerted to the next time when Harley is on. Thank you all for listening in, and have a great day.